Millionaire freezes when he sees a homeless girl taking care of two babies. Do you want one, sir? This is the story of a reclusive tech billionaire who stumbles upon a homeless girl cradling two newborns in the middle of a snowstorm. He takes them home, unaware that the little girl is, in fact, the daughter he lost 6 years ago. From this fragile reunion begins a harrowing journey, confronting hidden schemes, reclaiming justice, and lighting a path of hope for thousands of forgotten children. Before we dive into this extraordinary story, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. This tale will touch your heart in ways you never expected. Enjoy the story. They say Chicago at night can get so cold, it cracks the heart. But the early winter snow didn't stop Damian Whitaker from walking. Once hailed as the mind behind every intelligent system, he was the elusive billionaire who had built an empire from sleepless nights and code-lined screens. Yet tonight, he was just a lonely man crossing an empty square. The whistle of the L train echoing like memories striking the chest. Streetlights shimmered on the falling snow, each flake dissolving midair. Damian pulled his collar higher, but as he turned into the narrow alley beside Platform 23, his steps halted. Beneath a rusted staircase, half swallowed by shadow, was a small, curled-up figure. A girl, about 9 years old. Tangled hair, oversized sweater, a face smudged and forgotten by the world. But it wasn't her pitiful state that made Damian freeze. It was what she held in her tiny arms. 2 newborn babies, swaddled in nothing but scraps of cloth, not even real blankets. She looked up at him, eyes dark and glistening under the street lamp. Her voice, calm and oddly steady, rose like she had lived her whole life on sidewalks. Do you want one, sir? This one doesn't cry much. I think I can only keep both until morning. Damian stepped closer, not thinking, only moving. What's your name? The girl clutched the babies tighter, like a stray cat guarding the last corner of her nest. Lena. These are Olive and Nico. I found them near the hospital. Someone left them there. But I don't leave anyone behind. A wind swept through, biting. But Damian's shiver wasn't from the cold. It was from something stirring deep inside him, a distant memory, a blurred image, and a name. Lena, a name he was meant to hear 6 years ago, had the accident not taken everything. You 3 won't be separated. I promise. Lena didn't answer right away. But in that moment, something shifted quietly. Her gaze softened, just a flicker, like someone had struck a match in a cave of darkness. She nodded, barely. And just like that, those 3 tiny lives, forgotten by the world for far too long, stepped into the life of a man who had once believed he had nothing left to love. Damian Whitaker didn't know it then, but in that moment, under a rusted staircase, beneath the season's first snow, he hadn't just saved a child. He had just found his own daughter, the one the world had long declared gone forever. Ahead of them lay a journey that would redefine what it meant to be a family, what loyalty looked like, and how the love that wasn't born of blood could still be strong enough to hold someone close, for good. Damian wouldn't remember exactly how he carried Lena and the babies into the car. He only remembered the heavy thud of the Range Rover door closing, a sound that felt like the end of one life, and the beginning of something no one had prepared for. His penthouse sat on the 52nd floor, wrapped in glass walls that reflected the entire skyline of Chicago, yet never once held the warmth of a home. Not until tonight. Lena didn't complain. She wasn't timid like most children. She sat quietly on the couch, feet not reaching the floor, still clutching Olive and Nico like she feared someone might take them away. Damien handed her a clean towel, but instead of wiping her face, she wrapped it around the babies first. "How long have you been hungry?" he asked gently. "Since yesterday, I think," she answered, not begging, not playing pitiful. Just truth. Bare, unadorned truth. But the little ones can't go hungry. So I warmed their milk with my hands, held them close. Damien froze. When he handed her the bottle, Lena immediately tested the temperature on her wrist. When Margaret, the longtime housekeeper, brought out a warm water bottle, the girl instinctively loosened the cap just enough to let the steam out slowly, careful not to scald the infants. It wasn't instinct. It was an experience. "Where did you learn that?" Damien asked. Lena tilted her head. A flicker of confusion passed through her eyes. Then she answered, her voice barely above a breath, "I don't remember. I think a woman in white once showed me. She said newborns are like the thin wind. If we don't protect them the right way, they disappear." Damien turned away, hiding the burn rising in his eyes. She, maybe a nurse, maybe someone from a past Lena had forgotten, or was too afraid to remember. While Margaret took her for a warm bath, Damien walked to the tattered coat the girl had left draped over the chair. Absent-mindedly, he turned it inside out, and his heart clenched. There, faded under the collar, was a tiny tattoo. 3 numbers. 6-2-8. His daughter's birthday. February 6th, 8 years ago. Moments later, Lena returned with damp hair tied back using an old shoelace, dressed in one of Damien's sweaters, folded 3 times to fit. She sat down like she'd belonged here all along, her gaze direct, unflinching. "Mr. Damien, do you have a daughter?" The question cut through every mask he had ever worn. "I did. But she went missing 6 years ago after an accident. No one ever found her. Nobody. Oh, no trace. Just dreams," he whispered as if disbelieving his own voice. Lena stared into the air, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a dented object, a rusted tin toy car, chipped at the edges, with faintly carved initials. D.W. Damien dropped to his knees. It was the last gift he had ever given his daughter, on the night before she disappeared. Could it be? He didn't dare ask. This girl, clever, fierce, scarred in the same spot as his child, holding her old toy and, more than anything, echoing the very heartbeat he thought he had lost. Then Lena spoke as if sensing his thoughts. "You know, I keep dreaming someone calls me Little Star. And in that dream, I'm always looking for a tall building with windows that reflect the sky, like this place." Damien didn't know how to ask, "Could you be my daughter?" And Lena didn't know how to say, "I've always been looking for my dad, even if I don't remember his face." But at that moment, between falling snow and the soft light of the living room, where the past remained blurry and the future had no name, something unspoken was set in motion. They belonged to each other, even before they knew it. At dawn, Chicago hadn't yet thawed from the storm the night before. Everything was still, like the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to begin. Damien sat alone in the kitchen corner, his hands wrapped tightly around a cup of cold coffee. On the table lay the small toy car Lena had brought with her. The morning light slipped through the thick glass windows, reflecting off the side of the car where the letters D.W. were faintly etched. His initials and a nickname he once used to joke with his daughter. Daddy's Wish. He had imagined 100 possibilities. Kidnapping, accident, even death. He had told himself the hope he clung to was just grief, unresolved and festering. But never, not once, had he imagined his daughter might return in the form of a homeless girl carrying two newborns wrapped in thin rags. He reached for his phone and scrolled to a contact he had kept all these years for one reason only: that someday he might need him. James Kittrell, Investigations, Missing Persons Division, retired. James, it's me, Damian Whitaker. I need you to find a girl named Lena Carter, around 9 years old. I have reason to believe she might be Sophia Whitaker. There was a pause on the other end. Then James spoke quietly. Damian, that child was legally declared dead. Then maybe we were wrong. That afternoon, while Lena napped with the two infants curled beside her, Damian walked into the room, intending only to gently pull the blanket higher. But as he bent down, the edge of the blanket folded back, revealing a crumpled sheet of paper, a rough pencil sketch drawn in waxy strokes. A 2-story house. A man with curly hair holding a girl in a dress. On the roof, a large S and 3 stars. Damian sank to the floor, the drawing trembling in his hands. He remembered. Before Sophia disappeared, he used to tell her bedtime stories, always about a father who lived in an S-shaped house with his little girl, Little Star, because she believed she was the wish he and Elena had waited for their whole lives. It was a memory only the two of them shared. When Lena woke, she sat up gently, not disturbing Olive or Nico. Did you draw this? Damian asked. Lena nodded. Do you remember it? She bit her lip, eyes drifting down to the sketch, then said softly, Not really. But every time I forget something, I draw, and I always draw that house. I think someone used to wait for me there. Something inside Damian began to shift. A quiet, aching fear took root. If this girl truly was his daughter, then who had hidden her for the past 6 years? And why? Later that evening, James Kittrell called back. I ran it through the system. No official records of a Lena Carter born around that time. But there was a medical report in 2017 from a temporary health outpost in rural Indiana. They logged a case, a girl unidentified, around age 3, severe head trauma, temporary amnesia. No guardian ever came forward, no further records. Damian's chest tightened. Jane Doe? In 2017, the same year Sophia disappeared. Exactly. And here's the strange part. The clinic shut down a week after filing that report. Official reason: budget cuts. But internal notes said the girl vanished one stormy night, along with a medical staffer whose identity was never confirmed. Damian felt a chill spread through him, not from the weather, but from the puzzle slowly coming into focus. Lena's story about the woman in white, the smell of medicine, the warmth of strange arms. It wasn't imagination. It was a memory that had survived the fog of trauma. That night, as the city lit up and train whistles echoed from afar, Damian stood on the balcony overlooking the skyline. In the living room below, Lena hummed softly to the babies, rocking them to sleep with a lullaby so delicate it barely touched the air. A few lines, in French. Dors, mon étoile, dors. La nuit est là, ton papa te garde. Damian froze. His late wife, Elena, French by birth, used to sing that song to their daughter every night. He had never taught it to anyone. And Elena had died the same night Sophia disappeared. He stepped back inside. Lena, folding a hand towel, spoke without looking up. I don't speak French, but that song just comes into my head sometimes. He sat beside her, his voice steady, quiet. Lena, may I ask you something? Lena, if one day I told you, you might be someone very important to me? Would that scare you? Damien's voice was barely a whisper. Lena looked up. For the first time, her eyes held no defense. Just a long pause. And then a quiet response. No, not if you don't leave us. That answer, simple, honest, and piercing, landed directly where Damien was weakest. A heart that had once lost a daughter, a wife, and every belief that love could return. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. And in that moment, something within him began to solidify. Not just hope, but certainty. Lena was Sophia, and someone had gone to great lengths to erase her from his life. By Monday morning, Damien sat inside the executive boardroom on the 41st floor of Whitaker Technologies. The glass walls mirrored the faces of directors, assistants, and legal counsel. But only one person made his skin crawl. Bradley. Once his closest confidant, the man who had once promised, "No one outside this family will ever control this company." Now, he was the acting CEO in Damien's place, appointed after Damien had stepped back due to personal loss. "It's good to have you back," Bradley smiled, pouring coffee. "Though I've heard you're caring for some child now. Not exactly ideal for shareholders." Damien didn't respond, but his gaze sharpened. In his hand was a printed copy of a 2017 internal memo, the year of the accident, designating Bradley as the emergency contact for leadership transition if Damien was incapacitated. A small detail. But now, it was everything. That evening, back in the penthouse, Damien opened an old filing cabinet in his study. He pulled out a thick, dust-covered envelope. Marcus Street accident, Whitaker family. For the first time in 6 years, he allowed himself to look at the crime scene photos, the crushed SUV, the blood-streaked fragments. Elena, his wife, had died on impact. Sophia, gone without a trace, and one unresolved anomaly. The vehicle's braking system had been completely disabled. Accident, the police had ruled. But tonight, as Damien connected the dots, Jane Doe vanishing from a clinic, a suspicious shutdown, and Bradley named as interim controller, he saw what he hadn't dared to face before. Someone had wanted him to lose everything. The next morning, James Kittrell sent a preliminary report. Bradley Kessler, prior to becoming acting CEO, was an anonymous investor in a shadow finance group specializing in funneling unidentified minors into off-record institutions. In the past 7 years, 4 children disappeared from systems he was linked to. Damien read the words like peeling the wires off a live bomb. And here's the last part, James added. The 2017 forensic report shows the car's ECU system had been digitally tampered with. Signal overrides. The only person with direct access to that interface at the time was Bradley. Damien gripped the chair arm tightly. Still, calm, like the surface of a lake seconds before a hurricane. He didn't need more proof, not the courts. What he needed was to protect Lena, Sophia, and the 2 babies she had guarded with every inch of her tiny frame. That night, Damien sat beside Lena as she tucked Olive and Nico into sleep. "You know," he whispered, "sometimes, to protect the people I loved, I stayed silent. But silence has a cost. I let the wrong man take you from me for 6 years." Lena looked up, her voice as light as breath. "I was never lost. Just not found yet." Damien froze. He didn't need DNA results. He didn't need signatures or confirmations. That single sentence was enough. In it, he had found the daughter he thought he had lost forever. From the penthouse high above, Damien gazed out at the city as night settled in. But inside him, for the first time in 6 years, something flickered, small, steady, a light. If the truth had been buried by human hands, then he would be the one to unearth it, no matter the cost. Lena awoke just past midnight, drenched in cold sweat. The little girl sat bolt upright in the dim glow of the nightlight. Olive was sound asleep beside her, and Nico stirred gently in the cradle. The room was quiet, safe. But inside Lena, a storm was rising. The dream, the third time this week, was always the same. A screech like metal tore open, the thick, choking stench of gasoline, everything spinning, and the voice of a man, screaming in panic. "Hold her, Elena. Hold her tight." Then, nothing. A blank. Silence. Cold. Then, hospital lights. A woman in a white coat. The sterile smell of antiseptic. A gentle voice in French Lena didn't understand. Yet, something in her soul recognized. Damien found her the next morning sitting alone on the balcony, her hair tousled from lack of sleep. She wasn't crying, just staring toward the horizon where the winter sun was trying to push through the clouds. "You dreamed again?" he asked, sitting beside her. Lena nodded. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I always hear that man's voice. Every time, when the crash happens." Damien said nothing. He simply reached out his hand. She took it, like a ritual they'd unknowingly created after each nightmare. "I remember. Someone's arms holding me tight, then let go. Then, nothing." Inside, James Kittrell waited in the study, a sealed folder on his lap and tension in his eyes. "What's wrong?" Damien asked. "We've got a problem," James said. "Bradley Kessler just filed an emergency motion in court. He's demanding a formal investigation into your custody of the 3 children." Damien looked up. "He's accusing you of using an unidentified minor to manipulate control over the company. He's also petitioned for the children to be placed into a board-sponsored group care facility, effective immediately." The air turned to ice. "How much time do we have?" 72 hours until the preliminary hearing, and if we can't verify Lena's identity, she can be removed without further explanation." Damien stood. No anger, no shouting. Just a single sentence, carried by a father's resolve, spoken for the first time in 6 years. No one is taking her away again. Not this time. That evening, Damien found Lena beside the bookshelf. She was quietly flipping through an old fairy tale book, her small finger tracing the illustrations like she was searching for something her memory had dropped along the way. "Do you remember anything before the accident?" Damien asked. Lena didn't answer at first. Then she pulled a crumpled scrap of paper from her pocket. It was part of an old newspaper. Headline faded. "Tragic crash on Marcus Street. Tech billionaire loses wife. Daughter still missing." A photo of the mangled vehicle, a blurry image of Damien, and a girl, around 3, olive green eyes, soft curls, standing beside her parents. "I don't know who gave me this," Lena whispered. "But every time I look at it, my heart aches, like it's trying to say something my head can't understand." Damien gently squeezed her hand. "That's all right. We'll find every piece, one at a time." The next morning, Damien scheduled a DNA test. Lena didn't ask why. She just said one thing that nearly broke him. "If it doesn't match, will you still keep us?" Damien pulled her into his arms. "Yes, always. You're my daughter either way. Family is something we choose to hold on to, not something proven by paper." In the 3 days that followed, Damien prepared for the legal war ahead. But he wasn't alone. Lena began drawing everything her memory could retrieve. A star-shaped cookie. A man with glasses who always placed his phone on top of the fridge when cooking, a habit only Damien had. Every detail was a fragment, a flicker of light in the dark. And eventually, they would lead both of them home. Because beneath the ashes of memory, there is always a flame that refuses to go out. The night before the hearing, the penthouse, usually quiet, carried a weight in the air, like the tension before a storm. Margaret, the loyal housekeeper, prepared dinner, but no one ate much. Both Damien and Lena understood that tomorrow wasn't just about the courtroom. It was a test of what it truly meant to be a family. Damien walked into his study, gripping the thick folder of legal documents. Inside were emergency custody petitions, James Kittrell's investigative report, a sealed DNA test unopened. He sat at his desk, the amber light catching lines on his face that had deepened over just a few days. He wondered if he wasn't Lena's biological father. Did he still have the right to keep her? The question had no answer before a small voice rose behind him. Mr. Damien. Lena stood in the doorway, hugging a small pillow stitched with 3 stars. She hesitated. I can't sleep. I'm scared that tomorrow they'll take us away. Damien walked over and sat beside her. No one is taking you anywhere. I promise. Lena looked up. In her eyes wasn't just fear, but a fragile hunger to believe. One last time, in an adult's word. I remembered something else, she whispered, as if the memory might vanish the moment it was spoken. Before the car flipped, Dad gave me a cookie, shaped like a star. He said, when you're scared, put it in your mouth, so your heart remembers it's still loved. Damien went still. No one but he and Elena had known that. He used to bake star-shaped cookies just for Sophia, each one iced with tiny letters. You're safe. His daughter had called them her anti-lost charms. The next morning, sunlight poured in sharp as blades through the curtains. Lena wore a deep blue dress Margaret had chosen. Olive and Nico were nestled in their coats, snug in their stroller. Margaret tied Lena's hair back with a velvet ribbon, the same style Elena used to do every Monday morning. Ready? Damien asked. Lena nodded, clutching the worn tin toy car. Its DW engraving now faded. In her other hand, a broken star-shaped cookie, freshly made by Damien the night before. Though she didn't say it aloud, he knew. It was how she protected her last memory and held on to her delicate faith in miracles. Chicago's City Hall towered before them, cold as a fortress of glass and steel. In the waiting room, Damien sat beside Lena while James Kittrell flipped through the final documents. Bradley invited the press, James muttered. He's turning the hearing into a smear campaign, painting you as an unstable billionaire using a nameless child for emotional cover. Damien didn't answer. His eyes were on Lena, sitting quietly, staring out the window as the first flakes of snow began to fall again. Dad. The word broke the silence. Damien turned sharply. Lena hadn't moved. Her gaze remained fixed outside, her face is unchanged. But in that word, something opened. Dad, don't let them take me again. That voice wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't learned. It was instinct. The instinct of a child who had once said it to the right person, before memory was torn away. Damien sat beside her. What did you just call me? She blinked, then looked at him, eyes suddenly brimming with tears. I don't know why it came out, but it felt right. Just then, a court officer stepped in. The hearing begins in 10 minutes. Please be ready. Damien tightened his grip on Lena's hand. They rose together. James gave a nod as he organized the case files. Margaret waited by the door, her hand trembling as she slipped the other half of the cookie into Lena's coat pocket. "Family is something the heart knows," she whispered. "Not a piece of paper." They entered the courtroom, not as one adult and 3 unidentified children, but as a family, stitched together through wounds, now standing side by side to defend the last thing left to believe in. Courtroom number 3, Chicago City Hall. The air hung thick, like condensation on winter glass. Not from temperature, but from the pressure of truth, teetering on the edge of revelation. Damien held Lena's hand as they walked in. Her steps were slow but sure, the deep blue dress fluttering softly with each movement. Olive and Nico sat quietly in the back, cared for by Margaret, 2 tiny candles in a cathedral waiting for prayer. Across the aisle sat Bradley Kessler, flanked by his legal team. His face was hard, his eyes devoid of the warmth they once held. This wasn't about family for him anymore. It was war. The court convenes for an emergency hearing regarding Mr. Damien Whitaker's custody of 3 minors, including 1 child whose legal identity remains unverified. The voice of Judge Helen Monroe rang out, sharp, impartial, known across the state for unearthing lies through nothing more than silence. The plaintiff's attorney rose. "Your Honor, the board contends that Mr. Whitaker, a wealthy businessman, unmarried, with no known biological children, has suddenly brought 3 unidentified minors into his private residence. One of these children may be tied to a 6-year-old missing persons case. Without proper verification, this opens the door to potential emotional manipulation and corporate influence." Damien didn't react. He had prepared, not to justify, but to do something simpler. Tell the truth. When it was his turn, he stood. His voice was calm, deep. "Your Honor, I didn't take these children into my home to polish a public image. I don't need to prove charity. The only thing I need to prove is that this is my family." He looked toward Lena. She clutched the worn tin car with the faded DW etched on its side. "Her name is Lena, or at least that's the name she's been using. But in the days she's lived with me, she's recalled memories of a French lullaby, of star-shaped cookies I used to bake for my daughter. And yesterday, she called me something I never thought I'd hear again. Dad." Lena was called to the stand. She walked slowly up to the witness chair. Judge Monroe leaned forward and spoke gently. "Do you understand this is a place where we tell the truth?" Lena nodded. "And do you know why you're here today?" Lena looked at Damien, then turned back, her voice quiet, but strangely luminous. "To keep my family, because I don't want to lose my dad again." The room fell into stillness. The judge tilted her head slightly. "You said again. What do you mean by that?" Lena closed her eyes, then opened them. "I remember one night the car slipped off the road. I saw my mom scream and my dad held me tight. Then I was in a hospital. Someone fed me, helped me sleep. But no one came back. No one said my name. They just called me Jane." A brief silence followed. Judge Monroe leaned toward the clerk and exchanged a quiet word. Damien's attorney stepped forward and submitted the DNA results. The judge reviewed the file carefully, then turned to Lena. "This child is the biological daughter of Marcus Whitaker and Elena Beaulieu, which means she is the direct descendant of Mr. Damien Whitaker. DNA match, 99.99%. Bradley went pale, but the final blow was still to come. James Kittrell stepped forward. In his hand was a classified folder containing invoices from Bradley's company, payments linked to surveillance of missing children's records, unlicensed care facilities, and most damning of all, compensation for a fraudulent medical worker, the same one who took Lena from the clinic that night. Judge Monroe brought down her gavel, soft but final. Damien didn't react. He had prepared, not to justify, but to do something simpler. Tell the truth. When it was his turn, he stood. His voice was calm, deep. Your Honor, I didn't take these children into my home to polish a public image. I don't need to prove charity. The only thing I need to prove is that this is my family. He looked toward Lena. She clutched the worn tin car with the faded DW etched on its side. Her name is Lena, or at least that's the name she's been using. But in the days she's lived with me, she's recalled memories of a French lullaby, of star-shaped cookies I used to bake for my daughter. And yesterday, she called me something I never thought I'd hear again. Dad. Lena was called to the stand. She walked slowly up to the witness chair. Judge Monroe leaned forward and spoke gently. Do you understand this is a place where we tell the truth? Lena nodded. And do you know why you're here today? Lena looked at Damien, then turned back, her voice quiet, but strangely luminous. To keep my family, because I don't want to lose my dad again. The room fell into stillness. The judge tilted her head slightly. You said again. What do you mean by that? Lena closed her eyes, then opened them. I remember one night the car slipped off the road. I saw my mom scream and my dad held me tight. Then I was in a hospital. Someone fed me, helped me sleep. But no one came back. No one said my name. They just called me Jane. A brief silence followed. Judge Monroe leaned toward the clerk and exchanged a quiet word. Damien's attorney stepped forward and submitted the DNA results. The judge reviewed the file carefully, then turned to Lena. This child is the biological daughter of Marcus Whitaker and Elena Beaulieu, which means she is the direct descendant of Mr. Damien Whitaker. DNA match, 99.99%. Bradley went pale, but the final blow was still to come. James Kittrell stepped forward. In his hand was a classified folder containing invoices from Bradley's company, payments linked to surveillance of missing children's records, unlicensed care facilities, and most damning of all, compensation for a fraudulent medical worker, the same one who took Lena from the clinic that night. Judge Monroe brought down her gavel, soft but final. The court finds sufficient indication of identity suppression in a missing child case with potential for criminal liability. Judge Monroe turned to Damien. Mr. Whitaker, as the legal guardian, do you pledge to care for these children, not for financial gain, not for image, but out of pure love and responsibility? Damien didn't hesitate. I lost my daughter once. I won't let that happen again. And I love these children with everything that's left in this heart. The judge gave the faintest smile. This court grants Mr. Damien Whitaker full legal guardianship of the 3 minors, including Lena, hereby officially recognized as Sophia Whitaker. Any action to interfere with or threaten this custody will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Lena sprang down from the witness stand without waiting for permission. She ran straight into Damien's arms, not with the gentleness of a child, but with the force of a soul that had finally come home. Let's go home, Dad. There was no chaos in the downfall of Bradley Kessler, no gunshots, no slammed doors, just the cold, echoing steps of 2 officers approaching, handcuffing him in the courthouse rotunda. and the stunned eyes of a man who once believed he could control the world simply by hiding a child deep enough. "You'll regret touching the bloodline of my family," Damien whispered as he passed, his voice low and final, like the closing strike of a coffin lid. Bradley turned to answer, but no words came. Beside Damien stood Lena, no longer a nameless girl, holding his hand, her eyes calm yet fierce, a gaze that outgrew her 9 years. That afternoon, the doors of Damien's penthouse opened to welcome them, not as a residence, but as a home. Margaret had everything ready. A new rug in the center of the living room, high chairs for Olive and Nico, and a wooden nameplate hanging by the window. "The Whitaker family, where hearts are found." Damien changed out of his suit into an old gray sweater. Lena, still clinging to the chipped tin car, ran through the apartment as if stitching back together fragments of memory. She stopped in front of a white door, the old bedroom that had been locked for 6 years. "I remember this," she whispered, then turned to Damien. "I used to hang a little bear on this handle." Damien opened the door. Inside was a small bed, still covered in the same cream blanket with star patterns. On the desk, a faded photograph. Damien, Elena, and 3-year-old Sophia, grinning wide with a star-shaped cookie stuck to her forehead. Lena, now Sophia, stood still. No tears, no smile. Just silence, as if a long journey had finally reached its end, where heart and memory met in the same room. That night, the 4 of them, Damien, Sophia, Olive, and Nico, shared their first dinner as a real family. Sophia spoon-fed the twins 1 bite at a time. Damien watched them, his heart filled with peace and pain all at once. Peace because they were finally home. Pain because reunion had cost them 6 lost years. "Tomorrow," Damien said, "we'll go buy books, pick your own pillow, and, if you want, start learning again." Sophia looked up, squinting playfully. "You'll learn too, right?" "Me?" "You'll learn how to trust people again, believe you deserve a family." Damien smiled. No need to promise, because tonight, his heart had already said yes. When the house had fallen quiet, Damien stepped alone onto the balcony. He looked out at Chicago, lit up like a constellation. This was the city where he'd lost everything. And tonight, it was where everything returned. Not just his daughter, but himself. His phone buzzed. It was James Kittrell. "Hawthorne Media is running your story on tomorrow's front page. They asked if you'd like to make a statement." Damien glanced back inside, where Sophia lay curled around Nico and Olive, the rhythm of sleep wrapped around them like safety. "Yes," he said. "Tell them this. Family is not something you put on display. Family is the place where, when a child calls out Dad, someone brave enough can answer, 'I've been here all along.'" 1 week after the court ruling, the Whitaker penthouse no longer looked like the cold glass fortress that once towered over Chicago in solitude. Now, it was a true home, where crayon drawings covered the walls, toys scattered across the floor, and the hallways echoed with toddler giggles and tiny footsteps. And in the heart of a man who once believed he had nothing left to lose, a new thought began to grow. To do something. For the children who were still waiting to be found. One early winter morning, Damien stood at the doorway to Sophia's room, sunlight just beginning to tiptoe through the edge of the window. The girl was writing in colored pencil on a sheet of white paper, the words faint but steady. The Home Finder Project, where every child deserves to be found. Sophia looked up, saw him standing there, and simply smiled. "If you found me, then I believe we can help others be found too. 3 weeks later, in the main hall of Chicago's Central Library, Damien hosted a special press conference. No champagne, no spotlight. Just a wooden podium and a projection screen that read 3 simple words: Lena and Light Foundation. Damien stepped forward, his voice steady, grounded like granite, the same stone that once supported the building he called a legacy, now becoming the foundation of his second dream: to rebuild what the world had broken. "I used to think money could fix anything," he began, "but it can't. Some things can only be mended with love and belief. And sometimes, the first step to healing is being found." Sophia joined him, wearing a white embroidered dress Margaret had picked out. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice, light yet unwavering, filled the room. "When I was lost, I didn't remember my father's face. I didn't remember our home. But I remembered how it felt to be held tight. I remembered the whisper, 'I'm here. Don't be scared.' Now, I want every lost child out there to hear that too." The press conference ended not with thunderous applause, but with something quieter, deeper, like the silent gratitude of parents who once knocked on every door only to return empty-handed. The next day, headlines spread across the city. "From Lost to Light, Damien Whitaker launches Child Recovery Foundation after reuniting with daughter missing for 6 years." And somewhere in shelters, in temporary group homes, a few children saw that headline and turned to each other with a look, one they'd never shared before. What if someone out there is already looking for me? That evening, the kitchen filled with the smell of butter cookies. Damien wore an apron, his hands dusted in flour. Sophia stood beside him, pressing star shapes into the dough. Olive and Nico slept peacefully in the cradle by the window. "You know," Sophia said, not looking up from the cookie tray, "I think Elena, Mom, left one last piece of memory in me, just to lead me back to you." Damien smiled, soft as a breeze. "Your mother was always that clever." "And so am I," Sophia added, tilting her head seriously. "Because I didn't find a home with a map. I found it with my heart." The next morning, they began sending letters to nearby states. The pilot program of the Lena and Light Foundation was live. One first email was sent, one first call answered, one first photograph pinned to the map. And when a mother in Milwaukee was told her missing child might be in a temporary shelter in St. Louis, Sophia Whitaker, the girl who once lived under a frozen subway staircase, smiled. Because miracles don't lie in what you've lost. They live in what you're willing to search for, and what you dare to believe is still worth finding. No one knows exactly when the name Lena and Light Foundation first began surfacing in closed-door meetings of those unnamed groups, the ones society doesn't speak of, but victims remember by fear. Maybe it was after the 5th child was found. Maybe it was after the video of Sophia sharing her story spread across the country, drawing millions of views within just 72 hours. Or maybe it was after something none of them had anticipated happened. A girl who was once a target became the one carrying the torch. Damien noticed the first sign on a morning of light rain. A nameless envelope arrived at the foundation's office, containing only a torn slip of paper. Some children aren't lost. They were chosen to disappear. James Kittrell, now director of security at the foundation, examined the handwriting carefully. Professional. No trace was left behind. Could be a warning. Could be a threat. Damien murmured, almost to himself. Or it could be a confession. That afternoon, Sophia stood before dozens of children at a small workshop held by the foundation in the city of Columbus. She didn't use slides, no microphone, just her voice, once fractured, now full of strength. I don't remember all of my names from when I was little, but I remember my mother's eyes. I remember the smell of warm milk on the nurse's shirt. And I remember the feeling of thinking no one was ever coming for me again. She paused, then pointed to the children in front of her. But you're wrong if you think you're the only one. Others might let go, but we won't. Damien quietly left the auditorium when the session ended. He stood at the end of the hallway where a security camera silently recorded. A man in a dark coat had exited the room early. No name, no record. When James rewound the footage, the image appeared. The man lowered his head when Sophia said the words, "No one was ever coming for me." His hand clenched, not from emotion, from fear. That night, in the Whitaker kitchen, Sophia folded blankets for Olive and Nico. The twins had grown, starting to crawl and babble a few words. Margaret baked cookies, as she always did. But something in the air felt different. Damien walked in and placed a photo in front of Sophia. A grainy image captured from the workshop's security feed. Blurry, but the eyes were clear. "Do you recognize him?" Sophia stared at it for a long time. She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "I don't know who he is. But those eyes, they're the same ones that used to stand at the foot of my bed at night, thinking I was asleep." That night, Damien sat alone by the window. Outside, Chicago twinkled like stars scattered across the earth. But inside him, something stirred. Their story didn't end in triumph. It had only paused between chapters. Because what Damien understood now was this. All the children they had saved were just the visible part. The rest, the submerged part, was an entire system. Before going to sleep, Sophia left a note on her father's desk. Handwritten. "You once saved me when I couldn't even remember who I was. Now I'll save the others, so they won't forget they deserve to live." And Damien realized, when a single candle dares to stand in the dark, even the darkness begins to fear. 6 months later, Lena and Light expanded to 12 states. 2 years later, over 1,200 children were reconnected with their families. And in a session at the United Nations, Sophia Whitaker, now 11 years old, took the stage. "I was once called nameless. Now I use my name to call others home." The story didn't end with a period. It ended with a promise that those who had vanished would no longer remain invisible, not while there were still families brave enough to walk into the darkness to find them. And that is the extraordinary journey of a father who walked through loss, of a child who was once forgotten, and of the little ones who found hope beneath a roof once thought forever empty. This story isn't just about blood. It's about something more sacred, the choice to love, even when the world turns cold. If you believe that every child deserves to be loved, to be called by name, and to come home safely, leave a comment below. Share this story so its light can reach the one who needs it most. And if you'd like to follow more emotional journeys, more everyday miracles, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story from Hear and Wonder. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next story, where hearts are found.